Hey guys, welcome back to the channel where I cover missing persons, unsolved cases, crime news, and more. I've always wanted to know what happened to little JonBenet Ramsey. When I heard about her death, and throughout the years, it's just been one of those cases that I just want to know what happened to this sweet child, this sweet, beautiful girl. And it seemed as though her parents went through hell, and Patsy and her father, they ended up becoming cleared. It took a lot, but they're being cleared, as well as Burke. Now, it's looking like Gary Oliva is currently serving an indeterminate prison sentence for possession of child porn. He's in Colorado, in Lyman, Colorado. He was identified early on in the early 2000s as a suspect in the murder of little JonBenet. He's a convicted pedo, and he has a very sick obsession with cannibalism and eating children, according to conversations with a former classmate.
December 26, 1996. A brisk, clear morning in Boulder, Colorado. John Ramsey was up before dawn.
I was shaving, I guess, in the bathroom.
And we have a back staircase from the bedroom areas, and I always come down that staircase, and I'm usually the first one down. And the note was lying across the run of one of the stair treads, and it was kind of dimly lit because it was very early in the morning. And I started to read it, and it was addressed to John.
A terrifying message scrawled across 3 pages.
It said, "We have your daughter."
I just heard Patsy scream. I could tell by her scream that something horrible was going on. I didn't know what.
I immediately ran back upstairs and pushed open her door, and she was not in her bed.
JonBenet Ramsey was found dead, strangled, in the basement of that home. Wasn't kidnapped. This case still never solved. No one's been held responsible since 1996, but some huge developments tonight we want to talk about. Let's bring in our special guest joining us in New York, senior reporter for the U.S. Sun, Luke Kenton is with us. Luke, great to see you. Thanks so much. Read your article. Wow. Let's talk about this development. It's a man named Gary Oliva. Gary Oliva. Tell us what you found out about him, what his link is to JonBenet Ramsey.
So Gary Oliva, first and foremost, is not a good guy. The story involving Gary kind of begins on the 27th of December 1996, when he was reported to Boulder police because basically the night before he'd called an old high school friend back in California who he said through tears and it could barely catch his breath, "I've just hurt a little girl." So this was on the night that JonBenet's body was, a few hours after JonBenet's body was found on December 26th. Was crying that he'd hurt a little girl in Boulder, and he hung up the phone. Now his friend that was on the other end of the phone didn't know really what to make of that call, was obviously concerned, but couldn't get any information out of him. It wasn't until the next day that he went on the front porch, picked up the newspaper, and saw the news that a 6-year-old girl had been killed in Boulder, Colorado. He immediately calls the Boulder Police Department, reports the call from the day before, and then 3 months pass. He doesn't hear anything, and he calls the tip line again, reports it to Boulder Police, doesn't hear anything again. Fast forward 19 years later, Gary Oliva is in prison for child pornography offences and confesses in a series of letters to the same person that he called that night, claiming to have killed JonBenet by accident.
This is unbelievable. I mean, this is did police ever talk to this man in California? I mean, he is claiming to have gotten a call before this story is even in the news from this guy.
Yeah, so hours before it, made headlines across the country, he said, "I've hurt a little girl," and he's in Boulder. And bearing in mind at the time, this guy was was associated with the property about 13 houses away. He was getting his mail from a church 13 houses away from the Ramsey family. And the tip, like I said, wasn't followed up upon immediately by Boulder Police. At the time, they were zeroing on either Patsy or John Ramsey being responsible for JonBenet's death. It wasn't actually until 4 years later when he was arrested on the campus of the University of Colorado in Boulder with pictures of JonBenet in his bag, a poem that he'd written to JonBenet called Ode to JonBenet, and he was also found with a stun gun. And that was kind of a crucial development for investigators because over the course of their investigation, after the first few months, they kind of theorized that perhaps that she was subdued with the stun gun prior to her death. So that's when police started looking at Gary, which was 4 years later.
Yet nothing seemed to come of it all. Was he, in my understanding, there's a photo of him or images of him at a vigil for JonBenet as well?
Yeah, that's right. So this vigil took place on the year anniversary of her death. So that was on Christmas night. I believe that was held a short distance away from the Ramseys' home. And that picture that we published was actually taken by private investigators hired by John Ramsey, who were investigating Gary at that time, believing him to be a very credible suspect and certainly somebody that's capable of committing such a horrific act. The Boulder Police wouldn't look at Gary for another 3 years after that.
Unbelievable. One final question. How specific were the details in these letters, these alleged confession letters?
Yeah, so the confession letters were written in and around 2019. There's roughly a dozen of them. One of them I can read you here. I've got it written down below me here. It says, "I never loved anyone like I did JonBenet, yet I let her slip and her head bashed in half and I watched her die. It was an accident, please believe me." So he's claiming that he killed JonBenet by accident. Whether or not you can take that at face value, who knows? That's for Boulder Police to investigate. They did acknowledge the confession letters when they were first published in 2019, but seemed to kind of brush them under the carpet. They said, we've heard this guy confess before and we've looked into it. There's no further updates in this case. But I think, certainly he's a character that John Ramsey was particularly interested in. I think he's certainly somebody that's worth having a second look at.
Absolutely. Luke Kenton, U.S. Sun. Great job. Thanks so much, Luke. Appreciate it.
Now, this guy is incredibly sick. I'm not going to go into all these details. The U.S. Sun has done amazing research and work on this. This guy, Gary Oliva, has some highly disturbing Pinterest boards. And he had like over 300 photos of JonBenet Ramsey and other children. It's disgusting. And he's already a convicted pedo. And at this point, like I said, he's been in jail. He's been arrested in June of 2016 after he was found in possession of hundreds of images of child porn in Boulder. Now, there's some shots right there of some of his Pinterest boards. And of course, as we know, there's JonBenet. She was found in the basement of her family home back in December of 1996. He's never been officially ruled out, and as they said in the piece, JonBenet's father has always believed that he is a potential suspect in the murder of his daughter. So I think that this is a suspect that needs to be looked into. I mean, there's just way too much questions and information, and look at all these photos. I mean, to me, there's just too many coincidences with this man. He's already been in jail for, it looks like, at least 10 years, and he's only going to be released if he passes the state's SEX offender rehabilitation program, which I doubt that would happen, because most S offenders, they don't rehabilitate. They just don't. You can't rehabilitate these people. Now, in the 2 decades before his arrest, he was considered a suspect in the killing of JonBenet back on December 26th of 1996. At this time, he had ties to an address just 13 homes away from the Ramseys, and he made a phone call hours after her body was found, crying to a friend, "I hurt a little girl." The distance he was from the Ramseys' home, that cries to his friend, and all these photographs, that alone makes me, as an investigator, I'd want to be like right up on this guy and make sure that we investigate every single bit about this creepy, nasty pedo. Now his friend is named Michael Vale. He reported the tip to Boulder PD immediately. So he reported it in 1996. But the investigators didn't follow up on the lead until 4 years later. That's because they were so focused on the parents. They were just so focused on mom and dad that they couldn't figure that anyone else did this horrific crime. They just couldn't. They didn't go beyond, the inside that home. Now, it says during that incident, he had a trespassing incident. He was found to be in possession of drugs, images of JonBenet, newspaper clippings from her case, and a poem about the young girl entitled Ode to JonBenet. He also had a stun gun, a particularly interesting development, because remember, we believe that one was used to subdue JonBenet before her death. Remember, there was marks on her neck that looked like they were from a stun gun, and this guy has a stun gun on him. I mean, come on, let's connect the dots here, guys. Now, they say when Oliva, I keep wanting to call him Olivia, was arrested for the child porn offenses 16 years later, a search of his phone yielded more than 330 images of JonBenet, including pictures of shrines to the young girl and images from her autopsy. If that's not sick and obsessed, I don't know what is. I mean, he's already a pedo, and he's got not only pictures of little JonBenet, but he's got photos of her autopsy. I mean, how disgusting of a monster can you be? Now, Vale contacted investigators in Boulder after Oliva was detained, reiterating his belief that his friend was in some way involved in the murder of little JonBenet. So this friend was like, guys, I told you in December of 1996 that he called me crying that he killed a little girl. Nobody listened. So I'm going to tell you again. I think he is involved. Now, also, this friend Vale shared a series of screenshots with the cops that he captured from a Pinterest account belonging to Oliva, which have been obtained by the U.S. Sun, which they show here. Again, I'll be obviously including the link to this article, and they have extensive information on the JonBenet case. On the profile of the account, there's a folder dedicated to just JonBenet, containing 76 photos. There's another folder of images titled Children, containing photos of mostly young girls, modeling which appear to have been collated randomly from the internet. So if he's a pedo, he probably dislikes a lot of everything. Nasty. The existence of his Pinterest account is referenced in his 2016 arrest report. Citing an anonymous source, the report reads, the source stated that they found hundreds of children's photos pinned on Gary Oliva's Pinterest page. Now, if you find photos of children on anything related to a pedo's internet usage or anything, I mean, hello, red flags all over the place, even if they are not, dirty or any kind of nudity. To me, that's all like red flags all over the place. The source indicated a long history of knowing Oliva, and that Oliva used to mail the source disturbing things in the mail. So he used to send his friend weird crap in the mail. The source had concerns that Oliva was connected to the JonBenet murder and mentioned Oliva's criminal history and pointed to all the photos of children on his Pinterest. So this guy is like, he's like, dudes, cops, I'm trying to hand you someone who's like, is just so suspicious, and there's just so many reasons why you got to put this guy under the hot lights and do all your investigative stuff and look at him, because I think he was involved in killing this sweet child. But cops didn't do anything until all these years later. Vale informed police that he believed Oliva posed an immediate danger to the public if he was ever permitted to be released. Gosh, I hope they keep him in jail. Like, again, you cannot rehabilitate a pedo. You just can't. The officer who authored the report said he made contact with investigators overseeing the Ramsey case and informed them of the tip. I was informed that they had previously received and looked into this information as it relates directly to the Ramsey case, reads the report, and I looked at Olivia's Pinterest page. There was a section devoted to the Ramsey case. There was also a section labeled Children. Some of the children were posed in somewhat revealing outfits, likely done for artistic flair, and all appeared to be professionally produced. None of the photographs fell into the realm of child porn, and so additional charges were not considered at that time. But again, if he's already been found with child porn, and he's got other photos of Pinterest containing pictures of children, to me, I'm like, come on. I don't care if they're naked or not. He's a sicko. These are also making, getting him off or whatever you want to do. This guy's a sicko. And I just don't understand why the cops sat on this. Vale reached out to Oliva behind bars shortly after his arrest in an attempt to elicit an explicit confession from him regarding JonBenet's murder, convinced he was in some way involved. Now this guy Vale, he sounds to me like he's doing everything he can to be like, hey, I'm going to do your work for you guys, okay? I'm going to get everything out of him and go, here you go. I'm going to hand it to you on a silver platter. I'm going to hand you him on a silver platter. For decades prior, since graduating high school, the two men had stayed in touch via mail, updating one another about their respective lives. However, sometime around 1989, the subject of Oliva's messages suddenly became incredibly dark and disturbing, making frequent mention of blood, murder, cannibalism, and even child R. Within 2 years, Oliva would be arrested for SAing a 7-year-old girl and attempting to strangle his mother to death with a telephone wire. How disgusting of a monster can you be? And there he is right there. Never should he be allowed to see freedom again. Never. And it looks like this is the tipster right here, Vale, former friend of the nasty monster. Now, in the years that followed, he continued to write Vale, sending him cassette tapes containing sadistic recordings and newspaper clippings of missing children along with locks of hair. Gross. Whew. Vale would then receive a call from Oliva on the day JonBenet was found dead, convincing him that his old high school classmate played a role in her murder. He quietly campaigned to Boulder Police Department to arrest Oliva for years, but no charges were ever filed. See, this is what I have a problem with. He was doing, like I said, again, he was doing everything he could. He was being a good citizen. He was trying to help them, and the cops are like, "Oh, we got our man, our man and our woman. We're all good to go. I mean, just don't worry about that man behind the curtain over there. Gosh, how embarrassing for Boulder. Seriously, regardless of whether this guy has anything to do with it or not. He's a sicko. There should have been a complete investigation on him. With Oliva now behind bars, Vale started writing him at the Lehman Correctional Facility, where he remains today, and I hope he remains for the rest of his life. Quizzing him about that phone call back in December of 1996, and prying for information about JonBenet's death. By 2019, Val achieved a breakthrough. Oliva sent him more than a dozen letters over a period of several months, claiming to have killed JonBenet by accident. I never loved anyone like I did JonBenet, and yet I let her slip and her head bashed in half, and I watched her die, Oliva wrote in one message. It was an accident. Please believe me, she was not like the other kids. JonBenet completely changed me and removed all evil from me, he wrote in another. Just one look at her beautiful face, her glowing beautiful skin, and her divine God body, I realized I was wrong to kill other kids. Yet by accident, she died, and it was my fault. Whew. He's so in love with her, but he killed her. Okay. In other letters penned by Oliva, the predator claimed to have a disorder for killing children. I guess that's like the disease that some people like to claim that pedophilia is a disease and these people are just sick and they need medical help. No. If you kill people and you're into children and you are people, there is no cure. You deserve to be behind bars. That's just the end of it. Please don't hate me. I'm sorry I turned succumb. But even when you first met me, I told you how I wanted to kill children. When I met JonBenet, she took away that horrible craving to kill kids that you know me for. She changed me into a new person. But it's okay. I've killed so many children, I've lost track. What the hell? Oliva's letters were often accompanied by pencil sketches of JonBenet, sometimes depicting her as a god, and in one image depicting her eating his flesh. Wow. Okay. Boulder PD was made aware of the letters and acknowledged them publicly in a statement at the time. The Boulder Police Department is aware of Gary Oliva and has investigated his potential involvement in this case, including several previous confessions, Boulder PD wrote. The department routinely receives information on this investigation. Information provided to the police department is reviewed along with the many tips and theories we receive. Police concluded, there are no new updates in this investigation and the department will not comment further. Gee, you think you dropped the ball and you continue to do so? Come on, BPD. No excuse whatsoever. BPD's response appeared to signal that investigators do not believe Oliva is responsible for JonBenet's death. Now, his DNA was tested in 2000, but sources say he was not found to be a match for the DNA recovered from the crime scene. However, very little DNA exists in the case, and Oliva has never officially been ruled out as a suspect. Yeah, there's not a lot of DNA to begin with. So I think that even though they're trying to retest the DNA, it still seems to be a very difficult thing to do. That's why all this new technology, they want to test. They're very, very cautious about it because it takes so much DNA to run, run comparisons. And there's the nasty monster, sick freak. All right, and there's the poem, apparently, that he wrote that the officers found on him in 2000 that he wrote about JonBenet. Along with the newspaper clipping. And also, as they mentioned in the piece, the author here who mentioned when he was speaking to Court TV, to Vinny, that he was captured at the vigil for her a year later. Because it's just like a arsonist. They got to come back to the scene and he wants to relive all that. Disgusting. Vale believes there's an overwhelming amount of evidence tying Oliva to the crime. Gary is a monster, he said. I wouldn't be talking about this right now if I hadn't got that phone call. That damn phone call convinces me that Gary's involved. I got a phone call 6 hours before it was in the newspaper from someone in Boulder, 13 houses away, telling me they'd hurt a little girl. The emotional burden of all this has been like carrying a backpack of rocks. I feel like the moment I received the phone call, I was robbed of my innocence. I just want Gary to be held accountable and kept behind bars. I believe this guy, and I completely... He's holding on tight to this. He is holding on tight, and he wants to make sure that this is fully investigated. And I think it needs to be looked into 100% completely. And this guy is a sick, nasty pedo. And if he ever gets out of prison, God help us all. Just look at them. He's this nasty freak. And all I can say is I really hope investigators are finally taking this stuff seriously. Because this little girl deserves every single bit of the attention to get this case solved. JonBenet deserves everything to find out who her killer truly was. It doesn't matter that it's all these years later. Sometimes cases take way longer than they should. But that sweet child deserves justice. And again, I'm not going to go through the rest of the article. I want to make sure everybody gets a chance to look at it. But again, this is shocking stuff. This really, really is. And it floored me that Boulder has been so aloof about it. They're like, oh, he didn't have anything. He didn't do anything to JonBenet. Nah, it's just coincidence that he lived 13 houses away. And, oh, he called you? Oh, that must have been about some other, little girl. I mean, if that's like what they're saying, I mean, come on. I mean, how ridiculous can you get? I really hope that they're taking this seriously. They need to do everything they can to look through this guy's background and every single bit about him and figure out and if he didn't do it, I want to see them rule him out with beyond a reasonable doubt. Because his friend there, his former friend Vale, deserves it, and so does JonBenet. This guy has, like I said, has lived with this from the moment he got that call. And, God bless him for working so hard to try to help this sweet girl get justice. All right, guys, that's all I've got for this one. Do check out the U.S. Sun. They've got all kinds of stuff on there, and read the rest of the article. There's so much more there going on. They have the amount of research, again, is just, it floors me. It really does. All right, guys, I hope you have a great rest of the day. And most of all, stay safe.